Take a moment to remember who God is and who I am. There you go, lifting my load again. Take a moment to remember who God is and who I am. There you go, you're lifting my load again. There you go, lifting my load again. No longer am I held by the yoke of this world. Come up under the yoke of Jesus. His yoke is easy, burden is so light. His burden is so light. Take a moment to remember who God is and who I am. There you go, lifting my load again. Take a moment to remember who God is and who I am. There you go, you're lifting my load again. There you go, lifting my load again. No longer am I held by the yoke of this world. Come upon the yoke of Jesus. His yoke is easy, his burden is so light. His burden is so light. Oh, you're lifting my load. 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 You shoulder my weakness. You shoulder my weakness. You shoulder my weakness. You shoulder my weakness. You're giving me space to breathe again. You're giving me space to breathe again. You're giving me space to breathe again. You're giving me space to breathe. Your love carries me through all the valleys and the darkest places. Your love carries me through all the valleys and the darkest places. Your love carries me through all the valleys and the darkest places. You turn mourning to dancing. You give beauty for ashes. You turn shame into glory. You're the only one who can. You turn mourning to dancing. and the darkest places.
Well, hey everyone, welcome back to Volume Online. So glad to have you joining us for another Wednesday night where no, we're not meeting together in the auditorium to worship as we normally would on a Wednesday night. We're not joining together to play dodgeball, to have snacks in the cafe. We're not joining together in our small groups. But thank goodness during this time of self-quarantine and social distancing and social isolation, thank goodness that we have these resources at our disposal that still allow us to stay connected. That is our hope for you as members of the church body, as people of the church. You are the church, and it's during this time that we want to make sure that you are staying connected in any way that you can. And we're working hard to provide you with any resources that we can to keep you connected with the church during this time. And so tonight, we want to make sure that you're getting connected with your small groups specifically. And so after this, your small group leaders have some talk sheets that they want to be able to discuss with you. Spend that time with your small groups. Check in with each other. Make sure that you're asking those questions. Ask how people are doing. Ask how they're keeping themselves busy during this time of self-quarantine and social distancing. But tonight, we want to kind of be recapping what we discussed over the weekend. We have this brand new series that we kicked off over the weekend. It's called Love Like Jesus, where we're learning the whole point of the Christian life. What we are called to do is live a life that Jesus lived. If we want to obtain righteousness, if we want to live a righteous life, then we need to live the way that the righteous one lived. We need to live the way that Jesus lived, and in order to do that, we need to know how to love specifically the way that Jesus loved. And this weekend, we kick things off by discussing, well, in order to do that, we need to first know how to forgive the way that Jesus forgave. And we explored a story in Luke chapter 23, the story of Jesus being crucified. And this is quite possibly the greatest example of unconditional forgiveness, of somebody forgiving people where by our human standards, we look at this story, we look at what's being done to Jesus, we look at the abuse and the torture that he's withstood at this point. And as he's being nailed to the cross and he's being crucified, he's looking at his abusers, at his tormentors, and he's saying, Father, forgive them. Father, forgive them. And we are called to forgive at that same capacity. We are called to forgive like Jesus. And so when we were talking about how do we even begin to understand, to wrap our heads around a forgiveness like that, there were two main points that we were talking about. The first one we find in Matthew chapter 5, verse 43. This is Jesus, obviously before the crucifixion. He's speaking to a Jewish crowd. He's speaking to a multitude, and he's saying to them, you've heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. He understands the audience that he's speaking to. They're thinking with a very human mindset of when somebody wrongs you, it's only right, it's only just, it's only fair that you wrong them back. The punishment should always fit the crime. They're very much living by a blood for blood and eye for an eye mentality. And Jesus understands this, but he says, you've heard it said, I know that you have been taught up to this point, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Specifically, pray for the ones who persecute you. If we want to learn how to forgive the way that Jesus forgave, we need to learn how to pray for the people who hurt us. When somebody wrongs us, when somebody comes against us, when somebody gossips about us or tears us down or abandons us or takes advantage of us in some way, Jesus says you need to respond in prayer immediately. That's not a suggestion, that's a command. You need to respond in prayer. Not necessarily for the sake of reconciling that relationship with them or even reconciling their relationship to God the Father, but to making sure that your heart is still in the right place with your Creator. Because prayer, as we learned this weekend, prayer is not always going to change the person that you are praying for, but it will always stir something in you. It will always change something in you. It will always create an opportunity to be reconnected with God the Father. But the second point that we were looking at If we want to have any chance of forgiving the way that Jesus forgave, then we need to quite simply forgive the way that we have been forgiven. We need to understand we have been forgiven unconditionally a multitude of times. Daily, I know that I screw up, I make decisions. There's sometimes patterns that I fall into by default, and I know that over and over again, God has forgiven these things. And so many times I have to bring these things of like, man, God, I screwed up again, and I don't understand how you can keep forgiving me for this sort of thing. And we are called to that same standard of forgiveness. We're called to that same standard. How different would it look if God was as hesitant to forgive us as we often are to forgive other people? We are called, if we want to love like Jesus loved, if we want to forgive the way that he forgives, then we need to forgive the way we have been forgiven. And it's in Colossians chapter 3, verse 13, Paul is speaking to the church of Colossus. And he's saying with them, bear with each other and forgive one another. And if any of you has a grievance against someone, he understood what it was going to take to forgive the way Jesus forgives. He says, forgive as the Lord forgave you. If any of you have a grievance against someone, forgive as the Lord has forgiven you. And again, this is the same thing with prayer. It's not for the sake of reconciling your relationship with that person, although often it can do that, but it's more reconciling your relationship with God and understanding, God, you have given me forgiveness. You have extended me grace that I do not deserve. And I'm called to do the same for other people. The other ones that you extend that same grace to, the other ones in my life that you extend that same forgiveness to. And you've heard the old adage, the saying that holding a grudge against someone or having unforgiveness in your heart or bitterness in your heart against someone is like drinking poison and expecting them to die. So often we can be holding a grudge against people who have no idea. I can't tell you the number of times I've had conversations with somebody where they've said, hey, there's something that you said that hurt my feelings, or there's something that you did that rubbed me the wrong way, and I had no idea. And if they hadn't brought it up to me, if they hadn't offered that opportunity for us to be able to discuss and reconcile that relationship, I would have just kept operating the way that I was operating, and I never would have had that chance to even apologize. I never would have had that chance to experience that forgiveness from that person. And so it's in your small groups tonight. First of all, we just want you guys to get reconnected. We just want you guys check in with each other, see how everybody's doing, ask what kind of activities we're doing to kind of keep ourselves occupied, what new things we're learning, what new things we're trying out, books we're reading, movies we're watching, shows we're binge watching, anything like that. Just get reconnected with your groups. But also your small group leaders will have a list of questions, some discussion questions to kind of prompt some more conversation about this. What does this look like if we are going to apply these ideas and this mentality, this new mindset that we can develop? If we want to live like Jesus lived, if we want to love like Jesus loved, we need to forgive the way that Jesus forgave. We need to forgive others in the same way that God has forgiven us. And I know that there is at least one person in your life that you need to pray for forgiveness in your own heart. You need to be prompted in that way, and maybe there's somebody else in your group that needs to be prompted in that same way, and that's what we want for you guys this evening. Join us again next Wednesday as we continue our series. We're going to be continuing to take a look at what it looks like to love people, the people in our lives, to love others the way that Jesus loved others in his time that he spent here on earth. How can we live like Jesus? How can we love like Jesus? It starts with forgiving people like Jesus. Next week, we're going to explore what else it takes. We'll see you then.